Hi everyone, welcome to Land Down Under Hangout. Tonight's book is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, modelled very capably by Alyssa and Lisa there.
Lisa's is a little unreadable, but
A
Yeah,
bit blurry, your screen blur has got
yeah.
it, Lisa.
Model
Never mind.
very capably.
Cool. So who would like to go first tonight? This was a group pick, so not anyone's in particular. It was on a few people's to read list, I believe, um, which is how we ended up with it. Um, Alyssa, would you like to go first?
yeah, look, I don't mind. I somehow asked Shane, what's it about? And he said, oh, it's a Regency romance. And I'm like, what's that? And he described it. I'm like, oh my God, really? That sounds stupid. But honestly, I loved it. I really loved it. I like Pride and Prejudice. I like that genre. So it wasn't that much of a stretch to like take those aspects and extend it with fantasy. Yeah, and some of my favorite fantasy, which is fairy. So
Mhm.
that was really cool.
Cool.
Should I choose the next person or
Sure,
just
go ahead.
Bobby?
Go on.
You're on my right.
Ah, I'm all the way at the bottom on it's always funny how everyone's thumbnails are in different places on their computer screens. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I didn't think I wasn't going to enjoy it. I was on my TBR list. I was one of those people who went, "Oh, it's on my list. Let's do it." I'd been kind of a bit of a cozy kick anyway lately, so it was really quick. I did the audiobook and it still went really fast. Um, for me. And that's, with having a baby, like a brand new baby that I was looking after too. So it was a very easy read and it was charming. I enjoyed that it it pulled in a lot of nice aspects and stuff from, like Pride and Prejudice and stuff. But it was different enough that I was like, okay, this is nice. It doesn't feel like it's completely derivative, which was nice. So yeah, I was happy to have read it. Let's see, let's go with Kirsten.
I really enjoyed it too. I had it on my to read list, so I think I wasn't like surprised that I liked it, but um I did the audiobook and I found myself like making excuses to listen, oh, I might just go and pour some washing because I want to listen to them. So that's usually a good sign. I do like Regency romance type stuff, but I liked the twist that this one had. And I especially liked the way it sort of looked at the issues with, all of the upper class people at that time and so that I really enjoyed that part of it. So yeah, I liked it. I have to pick. Liv.
Sorry, I was just waiting for the dogs to quiet down for a sec.
Sorry.
No, don't have to say sorry. I really enjoyed it. It's been a while since I've read a book like this, and it just made me realize I really do like these kind of books. Sort of like a spin between that fantasy and the Regency and like the Pride and Prejudice theme. So it was really nice and cozy. I got to admit, it was slightly slow at the start, then it got really into it. And I think towards the end, it I think I was building up all these expectations, like this is like going to be like one of my best books. And I think it ended up being one of my favorite books of the year, but just didn't meet slightly the bar at the end. I don't think it sort of fit it all well together for me, but I overall solid, really good book. Um, and I just really like how they played with her, like the protagonist, and sort of delving into her character and playing with the concept that with half a soul. Um, almost felt like she was a little bit on the spectrum, and I quite, if that's the best way to say it, but I really like sort of delving into that and how that works when interacting with this society. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Who's next? Shane.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I had a really good time with it. Um, found myself very predisposed to liking it um, when I first got started. And my favorite bit about it is that her childhood friend uh, was just straight up a good, solid childhood friend. I feel like I've read too many where, like, oh no, the friendship splinters and there's this bitter whatever. And it was really nice just having, like, yep, we are solid. That was cool fun.
Hmm.
Uh,
Uh,
Lisa.
I had to put it down. I had to put it down for a week, because the way that it described her having half a soul was exactly how I feel when I'm very sick with clinical depression, which I have been recently. So I was like, okay, this isn't for me right now.
Hmm.
Um, and so I didn't start it in the right headspace. But it like once it started to really get into it, I think from about a third of the way through, I started to really enjoy it. And yeah, I basically had an audiobook for about 3 days, with the kittens sleeping beside me. So that was a really nice way to do it. Whilst crocheting, it's just the perfect trifecta. Yeah, so the audiobook was good. And it was an enticing story. It's sort of like it pulled you in, and I once I got past the okay, it's a Regency, got it. Okay, right, yep, okay, getting married is everything in this world, sadly, if you're a girl. And then it's like, yeah, but that's what it is, that's what it is. And then we get into the actual, the fairy stuff and the magic stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, now we go. So that was that was good. The last 2/3, yeah.
nice. Well, I enjoyed the book. I think I read it in like a day. It was short, easy read. Very charming. Enjoyed it immensely. I suspect that Pride and Prejudice has not imprinted as deeply in my soul as I thought it had, because I was a bit confused at first as to who we were supposed to be shipping. Um, but got there in the end. Um, so that is fine. I I wasn't. I suppose my one big reservation about the story was that, as Liv said, uh, the main character presents as perhaps like similar to autism or something like that, and equating that with only having half a soul seemed a bit icky. And I wasn't super happy about that, but that was the only. But it was good to see like a character with autism represented in a Regency romance. That was pretty cool. And I thought she did a solid job in that sense. But the fantasy justification for it had me a bit uneasy, I suppose. Otherwise, really enjoyed it. And it did do an excellent job of digging into other difficult things. Um, Given that Olivia Atwater's sort of reputation was made in like dark academia, I was quite surprised uh, that this was so charming and light relatively, I suppose. So yeah. But did anyone want to kick off with anything in particular?
I did want to ask, so was it actually an intention to represent a character with autism? Was that
I
author's intention?
I have no idea. I have no idea on that front.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
That was simply the way that I read it, and I think it's probably not an uncommon reading.
Mm-hmm.
I actually found her the characters very reasonable, and I didn't read her necessarily. Well, maybe on the spectrum, but I read her as like, wow, that would be a relief in that period of time to not be always wondering and worrying about being married and worrying about whether you were acceptable or whether you were beloved, or just a lot of that noise falls through when you don't have all those extra emotions that were necessary for women of that era. She could deal with, the ugliness of like life and the ugliness of, the nursing profession and stuff like that. Yeah. So I kind of found her half a soul a bit of a relief as a character.
It was a different way of kind of approaching the trope in with these types of books tends to be if you get a female character who can handle a gruesome, like being a nurse and being gruesome, it's because she's highly intellectual and she's extremely smart. Not that this character wasn't smart. She obviously was very smart and very aware, self-aware, probably because she had to be in order to communicate to at least her childhood friend what was going on. But it was just it was a nice different take on why a character was able to do these things. It's not just because she's very, academically inclined. It's because she has something else that allowed, like some other aspect to herself that allowed her to maneuver in the world in a similar way. Yeah, which I did appreciate. That just, it was a different take on it, at least.
Yeah, I like the way you described it, because it was, for me, it was a strength of hers, not a negative condition.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt refreshing in a way. I mean, perhaps not the implication that's because she has half a soul, but I found that her character was refreshing because I'm so used to, I don't know, like a typical kind of character like taking charge and nothing can affect them. Again, probably because they're more intelligent than all the other people, which I don't know, sometimes that puts them, I don't like the term, but sometimes it puts them in a sort of a Mary Sue territory and all of that with other books I've found. Yeah. Yeah, I liked her.
Yeah, I think what I liked is she was more emotionally intelligent than characters of a similar design who are, because they're portrayed as, well, they're able to do this because they're so intellectual. Whereas, so therefore, but it's because they eschew any form of emotion, whereas she could feel them. She was aware. She just was also aware that they weren't as saturated maybe for her as they were for other people around her. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I liked about it. It was the fact that she was emotionally aware, but she wasn't saturated with it, which was a nice take. Yeah.
I also liked in that she told us a few times that she wasn't good at reading social cues, and she kept putting her foot in it. But in practice, in reading it, it didn't feel like it happened that much, and I didn't like that could have been really painful to read, a person who just can't handle society and the social things. And so I thought that was not too strongly done.
I did notice that when I was reading it, like that because she would say, "Oh, she would say, "Oh, did I say something silly, or am I meant to have been more what this or that?" And I was like, it doesn't seem like you're unreasonable. But I was wondering, after that happened a couple of times, I was like, is that just because I have a modern filter? And so for me, in a modern sense, she wouldn't need to, like, we would consider an acceptable reaction for that time period that she's describing as being an overreaction now, or an unnecessarily strong reaction, perhaps.
Interesting. Maybe.
I wonder if it's also the people around her that she's grown up with. Maybe not necessarily her cousin, but definitely the aunt, who maybe wasn't always on her side.
Yeah, I mean, I totally got the fact that sometimes the way that she speaks is exactly how it would be perfectly acceptable for us to speak now. An assertive person, assertive woman, but assertive anyone really, to just say that. And of course, back then it absolutely wasn't. And she's being what's considered socially acceptable behavior for a girl, for a woman then, she's not following it because she is at times just saying, well, I think this. oh wait, no, but yeah, maybe I wasn't supposed to say it that way, but yeah, which I thought it really adds something to the story. It's cool that she, doesn't have the Regency young lady filter, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
And I'm
know. Her aunt
reminded.
said some pretty inappropriate things from time to time.
Maybe only to other women, as far as I remember. I might be wrong, but I feel like her aunt she treated the other women around quite poorly, but she seemed to sort of I don't know, pull her nose in or whatever when she was out in public.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. What I found hard was the fact that no, she has emotions, but she's disconnected from them, and that was like, oh, I can't. I have to take a break from reading about.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
the disconnection, which then you later find, although maybe other people want to talk about other things first, but the poor other half of her soul, which can't even disconnect from them. So yeah.
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 Bubby, hello. Lovely back of the head.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
And I'm reminded a lot of in Pride and Prejudice how um, Elizabeth there and Jane were both fairly stable and emotionally intelligent, and their younger sisters and their mother were all very simple women and just highly strung and just really off the deep end. And that seemed to be more like how the standard woman was in this Regency novel. Like, so she was more like Elizabeth and Jane in being reasonable.
Actually, the Jane Austen that came to mind for me is a bit more Sense and Sensibility than Pride and
Mm,
Prejudice. Obviously, like the romance follows more of a Pride and Prejudice arc, but
Yeah.
in terms of like the discussion of emotional intelligence and that sort of thing, felt a bit more in that vein to me. But before we wander too far afield, Naomi, do you want to share with us your thoughts on the book?
So I read it a little while ago because when we first decided to have it as our December pick, I actually read it straight away because I already had it as an audiobook. I really enjoyed it as an audiobook. Um, I'm actually going to pick up the second book in the series and listen to that one as well. Um, I enjoyed the romance as it was, didn't need to like her inability to have feelings in that sort of first portion of the book didn't detract from the fact that she was like, yep, I'm gonna, do all the things that I have to do to be a functioning member of society until she decided that she didn't. But I liked it. I liked the magic in the world, like the magic system that they had. It was really interesting. And I'm looking forward to reading the second book to sort of see where that magic goes.
yeah, that was missing a little bit. I mean, it was short and sweet, but I would have liked to see more. So I think you're right about the second book.
The second book doesn't follow the same characters, as far as I
No,
understand it.
it's not the same characters, but it's the same universe. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And there
which is why
is
I hadn't started it yet. I was so excited by the end of the first book that I was like, oh, I'll get the next one. And I went and I listened to the sample and I was like, wait a minute, who's the what? And I had to go on because I didn't bother reading the blurb. I was just like, I'll just go check out the next book.
To
Yeah.
be fair, one of the main characters is a very minor character in
Okay.
Half a Soul. But yeah, it's not going to follow
Mhm.
the protagonists from this one.
Yeah. Um,
So definitely going for a more romance structure than a fantasy structure
yeah.
in that sense.
Mm. I have to admit, so I know everyone else is saying that
actually,
they go ahead.
I was just going to say, I actually agree with Elizabeth about the Sense and Sensibility vibe
Mm-hmm.
to the story more than Pride and the Prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, the romance sort of arc is a bit more Pride and Prejudice. The vibe of the story in general was more Sense and Sensibility,
Mm.
Sense and
which was
Sensibility
nice to
was
see
the
a lot of people redo Pride and Prejudice. Like that's the one that's often redone.
yeah. S&S was the Dashwoods, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That tracks. What were you saying before, Bobby?
I was gonna say that I I I had a bit of dissonance when I was reading the when I was doing the book with the fairy world bit. So like because and I understand where it's come from, but I just thought it was interesting that everyone else is saying they really enjoyed the magic and stuff. And I didn't hate the magic, but I and the fairy part, but I kept getting tripped up because the author was describing a lot of the fairy characters in a particular way that, and my brain was because I don't read a lot of fairies, like modern fairy stuff. I tend like the most of the one that I read quite like not religiously but consistently is the Shauna Maguire Toby books, which is it's an urban fantasy, so it's a completely different genre to be fair, but like my brain kept trying to envision these fairies as like the Torquils or these the fairies that are in her books, but it was written in a much more like it felt like I went from Jane Austen into Through the Looking Glass once we hit fairy, which was kind of cool, and I could appreciate that. But my brain kept jumping between, like, and it was like this, and I was struggling a lot with it. So it didn't take away from the book in the end, but it meant there was a bit more work once we got into fairy, with me having to constantly have to reorient my head and be like, nope, nope, we're somewhere else now, which I thought was just interesting.
I actually saw some parallels between the Toby Day fairies and the ones in this book. Perhaps I didn't read it deeply enough.
No, I did. There was enough of a parallel that's why my brain was going, well, okay, this is familiar, and so it was bringing that in. But then the writing style, and their not their descriptions of how they looked, but their behaviors and their mannerisms was very Through the Looking Glass for me. So like with the he's on account. The fairy who stole her who was trying to steal her soul is a baron. I think he's a baron. And him wearing, like what, 5 coats, because that's what a good Englishman wears, is many coats. And I'm like that. And yeah, and the baroness, whoever else who was giving her etiquette lessons, being very, it was with the, yeah.
Yeah, if you do the wrong thing, I'll,
Yeah, pull your eyes out or whatever. Yeah.
It's really casually cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the best fairy style.
Yeah. Like reflecting back on it, it was very it's very cool what she did there, but it was a lot of struggle for me, which was kind of interesting at the time. So
I feel like it's more because it felt like whiplash going into that fairy world at the end. I don't think there was enough built before, because then it's suddenly there, and then suddenly the story ends. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating that, but I think that's where I sort of struggled with towards the end too.
I like the coming back, as in the pulling out of it. That was pretty fast.
Well,
I agree.
Going straight into it, but also you feel like you're just getting to know about this world, and then you're sort of like taken out of it. So I don't know. It was interesting, but I feel like it could have been a bit more done with it to make it work well and more integrated into the rest of the story and feel a lot stronger at the end.
I can see that. The suddenly getting trapped in fairy felt right. Like, oh no, you don't get to say anything. You don't get to embark on a quest. You are just grabbed. But it did like make it go, wait, hang on. That wasn't what I'm reading. Okay. Where am I now? All right, let me quickly learn the rules of this world, and then you'll overcome them. That's good. Yeah.
Which is perhaps authentic to the experience of the character in that sense.
Yeah. But I do feel like once we finished in Fairy, I felt like it didn't do too much once we were out. Like it seemed like it got wrapped up very, very quickly once we finished in Fairy. And then it sort of felt like the way it got wrapped up was very formulaic in how a fairy tale ends with, oh, everyone lives happily ever after, and there's this woman in fairy who looks after all the kids and is lovely and wonderful and airy. And I was like, that felt very different to how the story started, in my opinion. So I was like, that felt disjointed a bit. Yeah, with that. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that was intentional or if she was told, wrap it up, you only get X amount of words more or something.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think she quite nailed the ending.
And it seemed a bit odd because the version that we read on Kindle, at least, is padded with sample chapters and a short story and a bit of self fanfic and
Oh, interesting. I got the short story of how he
in Spain.
became, yeah, like
Yeah.
of how the male protagonist became the
Sorcerer.
magician.
Became the
Sorcerer,
wizard.
that's the word. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Everyone's
I
getting a
didn't.
crash course in how really shit I am with names. No.
I think we're
I read it
all a bit
so long
guilty.
ago that I don't remember any of the names.
Yeah.
So
I never remember the names.
Well, in good company, in that sense. Yeah.
Something I really liked about the section in Fairy was how the fairies. I liked how she had the fairies weren't particularly malicious. They just like had weird little hang-ups and very little regard for mortal life. Like I thought it was well done to have whimsy be that terrifying and that dangerous.
Mm.
Hmm.
I was puzzled.
Oh, Lisa, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was puzzled by the fact that the one thing that I've never experienced in uh like in any of the fairy worlds that I can think of, is that they would look up to the English in some strange way. It's like most of the fairy universes I've experienced, they very much look down on humans and mortals and see them as lesser. I'm thinking of the last three sets of things that I've read. And so that was the one thing that was like, what? That was a what? Like they're looking up to the English. He's trying to emulate the English. Okay. So that probably did throw me quite a lot in terms of their fair. Like I was used to the casually cool, no regard for suffering kind of not valuing human life, but the actually looking to English values confused me. Maybe that's fairies in the Regency period. I don't know. Like maybe that's.
I can't remember the books, but I've seen a similar thing done in Worlds with Demons and Demon Summoning to explain why these mystical creatures pay any attention to mortals at all. Like when in the worlds where they look down on us, it seems odd that you can convince them to spend so much time paying attention to what you want. And some worlds, like also read some Jack Vance where your summoned little Sandestin is as likely to wander off and do something else that interests it for a while. And I hope you weren't trusting on that to do anything important. Um,
If I remember, like, reading things like Juliet Murley and all of that, I find in some cases they gain power from humans and our world believing in them.
hmm.
Um, and yeah, still cruel and they want to play with you and all of that. I think that sort of leans into that sort of like mythology from the like, Ireland and all of that too. But yeah, interesting take.
I read a lot of fantasy and with elves and fairies and vampires and demons and all sorts of stuff. And a lot of the time, the running factor of why they pay attention to the mortals is either because the mortals give them life by either believing in them, giving them blood, or something like that, or they need something to squish. Those are the two reasons that fairies, elves, vampires, demons, whatever the big thing is in the world, angels, it's always one of those two things. They either need the mortals of the world to believe in them because it gives them power, gives them life, gives them whatever, or they need them because they need lifeblood from them or something, like they need something from them, or they just need something to squish to feel powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, this angle is an interesting, more unique take, and not definitely has its equivalents in the human world
Mm.
uh, and modern times for sure.
Yo, baby. Hello.
He's teething, so he's all like,
I'm
meow,
sorry.
meow, meow.
Mine
Yeah.
is too. I sympathize.
Yeah. He's got a tooth coming through, don't you?
Work
So
hard,
he's
buddy.
all noisy. Yes. I like the way that they've made the say of this world interested in mortals and also completely uninterested.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
like they don't actually care about the mortals, but they want to care about them because it gives them something to squish. Like they feel all high and mighty because they're taking care of the mortals. Look at me, aren't I so good? I've put all these mortals into my house to take care all these mortal children. Look at me taking care of them. Definitely not, using them for my own personal gain. 100%
Mm.
not.
Very interesting way of like discussing noblesse oblige right there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially considering the rest of the plot.
Yeah.
A bit of a nice mirroring.
Yeah. Well, we don't see anything, we don't really interact in the real world of the book with the upper crust. The most we get really is you hear about them a little bit, and the sorcerer, I think, is the highest up we get that we interact with, as far as I remember.
No, not at all. I mean, I suppose he is the highest up in some sense, but also he
He's only
was it.
high up because he's a wizard, not
Yeah,
because he's actually born of high up.
exactly.
No, I get that, but no,
But
it's
But
his friend,
his friend
I can't think of the name.
Albert.
Albert, yeah.
Yeah.
but
Yes.
Albert isn't that,
He's
they're not
like,
that far up. Like
Yes,
we're
he
not talking.
is.
What was his rank?
He's
because his
it's his
older
parents.
brother is.
He's the third son,
Oh,
so
Yes,
he's
and
only
okay,
technically only a mister, but his parents are nobility.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
And
And
Elias
his brother is obviously next in line. But yeah,
and he has a crippled hand.
well, no,
which-
I know, I remember that. No, but like, yeah, they were.
Yeah.
But where in the rank of nobility are they? Is more what I meant.
Elias is not noble born, the sorcier, Elias.
Sure.
He's not.
He's not. No.
no,
He's
Was,
yeah.
no.
was Albert's
I'm
father
pretty
a
sure
marquis?
Albert's.
Yeah.
Something like.
I think it was a marquis. Yeah.
Okay. I also have no.
And
I'm not really good at what the hierarchy is, like beyond below a certain level. So,
Right.
And they
I think
meet
marquis are third
a
down or
duke or something,
something.
don't they? At one stage, one of the balls they go to is
Oh.
the Duke and Duchess of something.
Yeah.
But they were a bit higher, yeah.
Of black,
Yeah.
black
yeah,
thorn
but
something.
I don't recall,
Yeah.
we don't really interact with them very much. Like,
Just the Duke of Blackthorn or something is dancing with Isadora. I know that.
It feels very much like the people we're looking at are kind of like the Ton in Bridgerton. They're not like the upper crust
mhm.
because they don't mix with them, but they're also not like the working class either. They're that middle class. It's not really middle class. Like
No,
they're
they're
still
not.
upper class, but
They would be upper class. No, not middle class.
what I mean
They
is
don't
that they're
merge
kind
them
of, because they don't really have a middle class as such. It's either you're a working man, you're this upper crust, but not really like the higher echelons, or you're like the upper crust where you're the king and people who liaise with the king and queen kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, sorry. So really the point I was kind of trying to get at was that the fairies that we actually see and that we interact quite extensively with compared to who we interact with in the real world would be the equivalent of the upper nobility who
Well,
have,
he's a
who have control over her
baron.
and are telling
I
her what
don't
to
know
do.
where that lands on the
Baron is
hierarchy.
reasonably up there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark
Albert's
is quite high.
Albert's family, his elder brother was inheriting the title of Viscount,
Oh, that's
which
right.
Doesn't tell me anything, unfortunately, because
less than a count.
that doesn't tell me much of anything
That's
either.
what
Like,
Anthony Bridgerton is. That's all I can tell you.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing.
Like an inheritable title that you get when you have done something, I don't know, knightly or whatever. So like success in battle, and then you get awarded to be Viscount, and it's inheritable. So therefore, you are basically going, "Hi, you're good enough for us to call you nobility. Welcome." That's really what a Viscount is.
so that sounds rather low on the hierarchy of
Yeah,
nobility.
it's like lower
Yeah.
upper class.
Yep.
Yeah, whereas Marquis or Duke is quite, or Earl is really high.
Okay.
Yeah, which I think we had one Earl mentioned in
I
the.
love that we're all sitting in front of devices that could give us the
Yeah,
answer
I'm just about
to
to
the
have
thing
a
we're
look.
talking about.
My
And
hands
So I'm
none
on a
of
I'm
phone.
us
cheating and looking it up.
Oh,
know.
Shane's having a look. So thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Shane.
But we're all sitting on devices that could give us the answer to the thing we're currently discussing, and not a single one of us is like, we should do that. We should look it up.
So no, there's baronesses and earls and stuff in the book. So
I don't
Yes,
really.
but we don't interact with them
Yeah.
very much. We hear about them
Yeah.
in passing. Somebody dances with
Oh,
someone,
okay.
or someone's paying a call on someone. My point is that we spend quite a lot of time in comparison in fairy with their equivalents, and that's when you kind of get, and they're supposedly mimicking
Yeah.
what they
I mean,
see in the real world.
they're
So
very much.
I was seeing what my point where I was trying to go there was more like that there's that classism discussion that she was making around they're so disconnected that they're more concerned about wearing five coats, or they're more concerned about do not look at other men or I poke your eyes out than they are about what actually are virtues, what actually are this. And she's using this absurdism of fairy to make that discussion, which I kind of liked.
Obsessed with the outward appearance, obsessed with the trappings of virtue without actually being virtuous.
Yeah, and or even understanding what that might be, and being totally happy to take someone's word on it rather than checking for themselves, sort of thing.
Yes.
Which
I was just saying I
comes,
don't really need.
Earl is third highest rank, Viscount is fourth, Baron is fifth.
okay.
Duke is
So
the highest
Viscount
rank
is
and
fairly
most
high.
exclusive because the dukes
Oh.
become kings when it's time to be a king.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, because the Duke of Wales is the Prince of Wales. So when oh, duh, Naomi, duh, I did know that. The rest, I'm like, who knows? And I did know that dukes are the thing that are below king because the princes are dukes of their dukedom until they become king.
But I think the parallel we're seeing then is that what we're looking at these is the only options for the lower upper class, and we hear that from one of the mother of her best friend's mother, is that you can be upper class with no money, and if you're only women you have no title, and so you have to marry up. Is there once they're in this transition to upper class, they have to socially climb. And it's an interesting comparison to look at that and then what Albert's going through in terms of what he perceives, which I would think we would all agree is the real virtue of working charitably for people who have so much, who the people in the workhouses and the poor and so on. That there's the actual real good work, as opposed to the trappings and the showings of, oh yes, I support charitable causes. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
While you're eating a 7-course meal, yeah.
Which, interestingly, I would be curious to know if he was no longer the third son and wasn't crippled and therefore having to having to see the world through that lens, would he have had the same thing? We needed him as that character to make that part of the story work. I understand, but like, yeah. It's interesting that she had to marginalize that character that much to perhaps make it believable. I still enjoyed the book, but
Mhm.
that it does actually relate to some aspects of European history, that it was often the well off enough, but second and third sons and wives and people who weren't the actual titled individual who did a lot of the good charity work in Europe. Yeah, that's historically the case. So,
I think it's a good observation that it seemed like for most of the nobility and minor nobility, even having a workhouse was part of the trappings of being noble, and they don't care what the conditions are like there or whatever. It's just like, oh yeah, I give to this charity, and some
And
dropkick runs it, and
yeah.
And in a lot of cases, they didn't even know like how bad it was there because they didn't go down there and look at it, and they didn't like. They're like, oh no, we're doing a good thing. We're giving them like food and a job, and we're helping these people that are in the workhouse. And it's like, have you seen it?
Yeah.
It's like greenwashing in a way.
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, interesting comparison. Yeah, it's like greenwashing, but not to a general public. They don't give a toss, I wouldn't think, about public opinion the way we'd think of it these days, the way corporations greenwash, but to impress each
Yeah,
other.
yeah, greenwashing to impress each other. It's like telling your friends, I have a compost bin. Look at me. They're not actually doing the right things and putting the right things in your compost bin.
Mm.
I have a worm farm, but I don't do anything about it.
Or I have a worm farm, but I've gone and I still spend all my money on super cheap plastic, whatevers and stuff. But I have a worm farm, so therefore I'm very ecologically minded.
All the worms have top
I
hats.
buy everything from Temu or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Mm.
On a different tangent,
Mm.
did anyone else get Sherlock Holmes and Watson vibes from Elias and Albert?
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And the sleuthing around the plague.
Yes, especially with the the stability and the sleuthing together, and yes, I did get those vibes.
I think I mean Albert is like a war veteran who was a surgeon. Yeah, it just and kind of the sensible one to Elias's eccentric wizardly genius, I guess. Genius.
Now that
Yeah.
you pointed out, yes, very strongly Holmes and Watson dynamic.
Holmes and Watson.
Like parallels.
Yeah, I did find this Holmes much more charming than the original Holmes, maybe because I felt more aligned with his reasons for being angry as opposed to Sherlock Holmes. As much as I very much love Sherlock Holmes, he always came across as just a grumpy old white dude who was quite privileged and whatever. So yeah, versus.
Which is what they kind of set Elias up as in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed quite quickly. I was like, obviously he's going to have a heart of gold. Why else would they have given him golden eyes, right? But foreshadow. But yeah.
Is that everything? Is there anything else that anyone wants to add?
I have a giggle thing. Something.
Oh, yes, please.
Why they called him the sorcier, which I think a sorcier in a French kitchen is the person who makes the sauces.
Yeah, the first
he's very saucy.
Because I was doing the audio book and I'm hearing it and I'm like, Is that what they mean? Because
Yeah, the chef, the sous chef, and the saucier.
yeah, that was what I got from it too. I was like, I'm pretty sure that and then I'm like, no, I don't think they mean that.
that did make me giggle a little bit. I also I mean, what was meant to be funny was the bit where they're making fun of him for not speaking French and calling him a saucier, emphasizing the French pronunciation. That was kind of
And that he didn't know French.
Despite the fact that his entire position was derived from the French approach to magic within the
I
kingdom.
do also love the fact that people were like speaking French in front of him.
Yeah.
Tra-la-la-la-la.
So one thing that I tend to notice, is the lack of people of color in a book, and the fact that if this happened towards the beginning of the 19th century, slavery would have been ended in 1807. So this is in the first 5-10 years after that, and you don't have a clear idea of who the servants are and whether that seems to be lacking, and that's one of my general criticisms, I think, of Regency in
You should
general.
read
Is
Mary Robinette Kowal, her Regency romances. Then she makes great pains to make sure that she has a diverse cast.
Who's this?
Mary Robinette Kowal. She has a Regency romance fantasy series, and
awesome.
and that was her big
First
thing.
book is called Shades of Milk and Honey.
I have had that on my to-read list for so long.
I'm gonna
All right, do we need to do a January read so you folks can get on board here? Sorry.
It's really funny you say that. I don't actually remember the description of anyone. I couldn't tell you what any character looked like. Like, I can tell you about, their clothes or their demeanor, but couldn't tell you what they looked like. Don't know. Can't remember what color hair they had. Nothing about them.
Honestly, I can't give you any concrete examples either, now, but I also read it years and years ago. So, but I do know that that's a thing that she made a big deal about for that series, was she went and researched it, and she was that's a problem for her too. So that was one of the things she did. Anyhow,
some of the recent movies of that period do tend to have a wider cast and have some some lords and ladies who are people of color, but I don't know how accurate any of that is, whether it's modern retelling or not. Okay, anyway, that was my only comment.
I do think it's an interesting flaw for this particular book, given its arguments about the upper class and so forth, and then not to kind of really represent much of the lower classes at all, or people of color in any class. It does kind of undermine it a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because it's always like that. The big tension is people losing their wealth because of this push downwards. Yeah, and it's huge, because you don't want to be starving out on the streets. Yeah.
Any more last thoughts? No? Oh, good. All right, we might call it there then. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will be back in the new year with The Invincibles by Stanislaw Lem. We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone.